and move into actually showing you how we can go ahead and copy files, and then after we copy files, how we can there are two rules that we have to do with, and that's how do we copy a file from its current location and put it in a new location and not actually change the name of the file. And the other one is where we can actually copy a file, and then when we change it to the new, or copy it to a new directory, the file name gets changed. Now keep in mind that we kind of want to make sure that we understand what the rules are in order to do this. So that's why it's important that even so this is a short, very simple example, that you kind of keep in mind with what I'm really going to do as I go through step by step, so you don't kind of get mixed up what's really going on. Now the first thing that this exercise on page 114 has us do is to, in the gray area there, is to make a directory called source, and then within our own personal home directory we're going to create a few files, file 1, file 2, and file 3, and then we're going to copy those files from there to the source directory. And then that'll show you how to copy them and keep the names the same, and then the other one we're going to do is how to copy a file and give it a brand new name. Now just as a point of reference again, I'm going to do an ls command so you can see that I currently don't have a file in here called source, and I'll move over here. This is starting to get pretty big, so I'm going to move over here from the over here to the left so you can see the last part here. The last thing I had in here was a file called temp. There is no file in here called, or directory called source. So to make a directory called source, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to I'm going to utilize, I'll move the screen over here a little bit more to make sure that it's going to be within your viewing area. And I'm going to go ahead and use my command mkdir to make a directory, and the name of the directory is going to be called source, S-O-U-R-C-E, and when I do that you'll see I get no error message. When I do an ls command, you're going to see that I now have a file called source, and what I'm going to do, because this is getting rather long now, I'm going to go ahead and move from the over here to the left a little bit so you can see that I actually have a directory in here called source. It's located right here. Remember, directories are shown in blue. So I'm going to go ahead back in here and I'm going to create 3 files, and these files I'm going to be creating within my home directory. And in order to do that, I'm going to utilize just the redirection arrow to do that. And remember, these will just be empty files. So I'm going to use redirection space, and then I'm going to call the first one file 1, and I'm going to press enter. And you see I get no error message. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use my up arrow because I want to recycle my commands. And I'm going to put a 2, and I get another no error message. And then I'm going to use recycle my command again, and I'm going to press 3, and now I have 3 files in here. Now the question is that did I actually make those files? If I look in here and I do an ls, you'll see that I actually do have now, I have a file 1, I have a file 2, and I have a file 3. Now the point that we're going to be doing is we're going to want to copy these files, file 1, file 2, and file 3, to my source directory, which is over here. I'll move the screen a little bit over here from so that you can see it is right here. I want to copy the files to there, but when I say copy, what that essentially means is that I'm going to leave a copy of the files here in my own home directory, which is STU001, and I'm going to put another copy of those, and I'm going to put them in the source directory. This would be a good example of where at any time I would have some files and I kind of maybe want to back them up, or I want to put them in another directory. I may have files that I want to put in a special directory and then assign permissions so that everyone can have access to it. So there's a lot of reasons why I may want to copy files. So in order to copy the files to the source directory, guess what I have to do? I start out first with utilizing the cp command, which means copy. Actually, before I do this, I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen so that we can see what's going on, and I'm going to do an ls command so you see the point of reference. Now, to go ahead and copy the files, I start out with the command which is copy, which is cp for copy. Remember, I have to have a space after that. And what I'm going to do after that is I'm going to specify the files that I'm going to be copying. One of the ways that I can do it is I can go ahead in here and specify each one of the file names. So I can go file 1 space file2 space file3 space. Now keep in mind that what this is really telling me is that I can specify a whole bunch of files at one time by just put a space in between each one of them. So I'm able to copy them all at one time, all on one line, and not do it as a separate command. I could have said copy file 1 and then told it to put to source copy file 2, but this is a way I can do it all at one time. And then what I have to do after that is that remember that this source directory that I have here is relative or right below my directory, so I do not start out with a /. What I just do is I put in the word source, that I'm going to put it in the source directory. And when I go ahead and do that and I press enter, you're going to see that I got no error message at all. Now, in order for me to see the contents that are in the source directory, remember I can use the ls command, and then I can go ahead in from the ls command, I can just type ls and I can type source, source, because it's relative or right below me, and press enter, and you can see that I have file 1, file 2, and file 3 in here. Now, just as a sidelight, I can also have done the same thing. Instead of specifying file 1, file 2, and file 3, I could have done it with a wildcard. But one thing to keep in mind that what's happened here is I've copied these files. I still have an existing copy of these files under my own home directory, but I also have another set of files underneath my source directory. In fact, just to prove to you that I actually did that, I'm going to change directory to source. Now it'll be in source, and I can do an ls command, and you can see that I do have those files located in source. Now what I'm going to do is show you another way that I could have copied those files using just the wildcard command. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these files. I'm going to do an rm. And guess what? If I want to remove all those files at one time, I don't have to type file 1, file 2, and file 3. I could just go ahead, if they're all the same, I could just do file and then an asterisk if I wanted to. Or, because I want to remove everything within that directory, I could just take and put an asterisk. So what does this do? It saves me time. I don't have to, it makes it easier for me, but keep in mind also it's a very powerful command. I'm removing everything at one time. If I press enter, it says, do I want to remove file 1? I say yes. Do I want to remove file 2? I say yes. And if I want to remove file 3, I say yes. And now the directory is empty. If I type in ls, you see everything is gone. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clear the screen, and I'm going to go ahead and show you how I could have copied those files using the wildcard. I'm going to go cp for copy, space, and then what I could have done is file, and because they all have, in fact, let me go back here and just do establish a point of reference. Actually, I need to move up one directory. So now I'm going to go ahead and do an ls, and you see I have file 1, file 2, and file 3. What I could do in order to do that and do it the easiest, most efficient way is I could just use my wildcard to copy those files. So I could take and type cp space, and now what I can do is after I do that I can go file, and because the number 1, 2, or 3 is in common, I can say substitute that with an asterisk. And then what I can do is just type the destination, which is source, source, and press enter. I don't get an error message. I can change directories to source, and I can see if I do an ls that file 1, file 2, and file 3 is in there. So what's really important about this is that I can utilize, this shows how I can use the copy command along with a wildcard and copy a whole group of files all at one time. Saves me a lot of time. Now what I'm going to do at this point is that I'm going to show you that, remember now, I copied the files by file name, and let me just pull that command up, one of the commands that I utilized when I copied all those files. And remember that what I've done is in this case when I did this, I copied file 1, file 2, and file 3, and when I copied them and the name stayed exactly the same. But if I wanted to take and copy those files and actually give one of those files a new name, this is how I would do it. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cd space ... to go up the directory. I'm going to clear, and then after I clear, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy cp, and the file I'm going to copy is file1. And then what I'm going to do after I do that is I'm going to go ahead and specify that where I'm going to go ahead and put it is I'm going to go ahead and for example, I'm going to demonstrate how I can copy that file from file 1 and give it a new name and keep it in the same directory. So when I get done with this, you're going to have a file 1 and then a file1.save. So I'm going to name the file that I'm going to start with, and then if I want to rename it as I copy it, I can just type FILE 1.SAV. And as your book talks about, this might be as a backup copy that I may want to have. When I press enter, you're going to see I have no error message. When I do an ls, you're actually going to see that I actually have a file in here called filesave.save. One other thing, I could have copied that file to my source directory also as a backup copy. The way that I would do that is use my old friendly command. I would just take and recycle my command. I'd backspace over here. I'd put after this right now under file 1, what I would do is I would put I would type the word source is the directory where I want to go to, and then a / is the name of the file that I'm going to give it when it gets there. And now when I press enter, I don't get an error message. I'm going to go ahead and change directories to source. And when I press enter and do an ls, you're going to see that I now have a file in here called file.sav. Here's the rules you want to keep in mind. The first thing is that if I want to take a file and I want to copy a file and I want to take and let me see if I can pull a command up here, and I want to go ahead and copy a file and I want the name to stay exactly the same, then what I do is I give it the name and then I tell it where I want it to go to. I don't give it another name. If on the other hand I want to change the name once it gets to the new location, then what I can do is, and let me see if I can find this command, then what I have to do is say, for example, cp, what the name of the existing file is, and what I want the same file, what I want the new name of the existing file to be when it's copied. So keep that in mind of how that basically works. And I would encourage you strongly to experiment with this and make sure that try different types of files so that you know how this works. Copying, moving files, and making and removing directories and changing permissions is the core, most important thing that one has to understand when they're working within the Linux and the Unix operating systems. Next, we're going to be moving on to how do we move files from one location to the other.